So I'd like to welcome everyone to the presentation by Paradigm, and this is an updated presentation just to bring everyone up to speed with where we are with our clinical development programs. I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and given the short time available for the presentation, I will be flicking through some slides and in some cases just leaving the slides for you to read at your leisure. We will be putting the presentation up on our website after we've gone through this presentation. Now, in terms of Paradigm's mission, again, that's there for you to read. I just wanted to highlight that Paradigm's aim is to develop and commercialise an ethical, safe and effective pharmaceutical agent, of course the Benase PPS, for the treatment of musculoskeletal disorders in humans with degenerative disease driven by injury, an alpha virus infection, ageing or genetic predisposition, as in the case of MPS. In terms of the COVID-19 update, I think the take-home message here is that Paradigm has, since its inception, worked as a remote organisation. So we are well and truly geared up to be able to have all of our staff working from home. We have the systems in place to continue our business as usual. So we don't see COVID-19 as representing a major barrier to our business and in terms of our business model. So all of our staff have been working from home for the last 3 weeks and doing an excellent job. And we don't see that any of the shutdowns being overly impactful on our business. One of the areas that we are currently working on very closely with our suppliers is the shipment of the pharmaceutical product from country to country, given that some of the countries may be imposing bans on goods being shipped. We're currently shipping a lot of our product to the United States, to Canada, to Australia, to other areas where we need it for various purposes. I'd like to thank all of my staff who've been working diligently since we started the remote operation. Business has continued without a glitch, and I know that they are all very focused and working on tasks which we'll go through in the presentation, but thank you to everyone for their support. In terms of executive summary, I think what I'd like to do is just touch on some of these points without going into great detail, but just to let you know, for those who haven't heard the Paradigm story, is Paradigm is repurposing the drug pentazan polysulfate sodium. It is an FDA-approved drug, and it has a 60-year track record in terms of both safety and use in humans. Our lead program is osteoarthritis, and in the United States, we know that there are 31 million sufferers with clinically diagnosed osteoarthritis in the US alone. So a major market. And I think one of the things to understand in terms of the biotech industry, there are two key drivers, I think. Drugs which address a significant unmet clinical need are generally recessionary proof. So if you have a drug and it's addressing a particular ailment and it's working very well, then obviously downturn in the economy doesn't adversely affect the sales of that drug. Part of our business right now is really to be working on the other aspect that I think is important in biotech is the generation of clinical data. Clinical data at the end of the day drives the success of a biotech company. So whether it be through our special access program or the expanded access program in the United States, or whether it be through clinical trials, gathering the human data is a very important part. And that data starts with submissions to the regulatory authorities, followed up by the execution of the clinical trials. And we have staff that are working on both of those right now. The submission to the regulatory authorities is a very time-consuming, a very exact piece of work that needs to be done, and that is being done for both Europe and the United States concurrently. And we also have clinical trials that are about to start in Australia, and we can go into that detail a little bit later. In terms of our secondary program, that is the program for treating the rare disease of mucopolysaccharidosis, that is again on track. In terms of our product for these phase 3 trials, Our product is finished. It is packed and ready to go. In fact, I'm not sure if you can see this on the video, but this is our phase 3 product, which is currently being shipped out to doctors who are using it in Australia and in the United States under the expanded access program or the special access program here in Australia. So we are generating data as we continue to build towards our pivotal phase 3 trials. The other thing I think I'd like to mention about Paradigm is that we have, since our inception, always worked off a cash preservation mode. We've always tried to have a very low burn rate, and we continue to do that without massive cost cuttings and things like that, because we've always built in to our system ways of being able to become more efficient and being very lean. So we currently have $73.6 million in the bank, and we'll continue to preserve that until we get into the middle of our trials where our expenditure will increase. But right now we are well funded through the phase 3 clinical trial and beyond. In terms of upcoming milestones and news flow, I think the first one which I'd like to just mention is the minutes from the US FDA meeting. They are expected to be with us relatively shortly. It's over a month ago since we had our meeting with the FDA, 19th of February, and we expect those minutes to be sent to us, but we do understand that there are some hold-ups with the agency at the moment. But once those minutes arrive, we will be making an ASX announcement with the details of that meeting. I have said previously that I thought the meeting was very positive and informative. By positive, I think what it showed me particularly was the great strength in having the BENA product as a cornerstone to all of our clinical development. My take from the FDA meeting, not that it's necessarily going to be said this way in the minutes, but my take is that it's going to be almost impossible for another company to produce a penazan polysulfate product that will be acceptable to the United States FDA. The reason for that is that the FDA is well and truly familiar with the BENA product. They understand the molecule, and they also understand the molecule has molecules within the molecule. And those molecules within the molecule are called moieties, and the agency made us aware that there were particular moieties that concern them because some of those moieties have adverse effects on safety or efficacy. And BENA has done an excellent job in controlling those moieties and producing a very consistent product. So the molecule is almost identical batch to batch, and the moieties are in very small and reduced levels from batch to batch. So in terms of talking to the FDA, it seems like there's going to be a tremendous advantage for Paradigm in exclusively using the BENA material. Moving on to the first dot point, the compassionate use program with the NFL, the Pro Players Elite Network we're working with. We did mention that we had our first patient dosed. This week we announced that all patients, that's all 10 of the ex-NFL players, are now dosed, and we will be expecting to release those results Q3 calendar year 2020. Importantly, we are going to be presenting those results with the same sort of tools that we expect to be using for measuring pain reduction in our phase 3 clinical trial. So while this is not a trial and it is real world evidence, we are gathering data and getting doctors to collect, for example, the WOMAC pain scores, which we will be announcing in Q3, and those WOMAC scoring systems will be used in our phase 3 clinical trial. We are also working with the FDA for submission for our IND opening study. We expect to make that submission to the FDA in Q4 2020. So the meeting I mentioned was positive in terms of the really important a concept from the FDA that only the Bene material is one that they understand and would be recommending for going forward with into a clinical trial, but also was the certainty that came with the FDA from our meeting. We asked a number of questions, and those questions were answered very clearly from the agency, and so we believe now we have certainty for our program going forward into IND, but also the agency gave us some very important instructions in terms of the next stage, which is the NDA, which is the step prior to registration. So we think we have a very clear roadmap now to not only IND, but also to NDA, which is very, very informative for us. In terms of the pivotal study for MPS, we have a joint parallel scientific advice submission to the FDA and EMA, which will occur in the coming months. This is to get consistency in terms of protocol design between the FDA and EMA, because this being a rare disease will be conducted in both Europe and the United States at the same time. So if we get agreement on that, we'll have one protocol, but we'll be then able to roll that out in both the US and Europe at the same time. The TGA compassionate use SAS program continues. We currently have doctors who are treating somewhere in the region of 40 patients a month. So we will be announcing shortly around the first 35 patients who have been treated with our phase 3 clinical trial product, which is this product here. And they have had their clinical outcomes measured in the same way as we'll be measuring the clinical outcomes in the phase 3 trial. So those data, again, while it's not a trial, will give people some insight in terms of how the product is performing in terms of both safety and efficacy in patients with osteoarthritis ahead of the phase 3 clinical trial. We expect to announce it in the short term, the first 35 of those subjects and their results. And then I think probably in Q3, we'll have somewhere in the region of between 100 and 200 results that we'll be able to make the market aware of. In terms of additional news flow, we continue to work with some experts in Europe on the assessment of the respiratory indication, whether we're going for a topical administration or a administration direct to the lungs. That's still work that's underway. And we're also working on peer review publication for the write-up of our phase 2B osteoarthritis study, and also the write-up and peer review of our phase 2A viral arthritis clinical trial. That's the Ross River trial, which had some very impressive results, not only clinical and patient-assessed pain outcomes, but also some very good objective data in terms of the hand grip strength and others. That's going to be a very exciting publication. Moving on to calendar year 2021, a phase 3 OA clinical trial. We expect to also be in clinical trial with the MPS. We hope to have xylosol launched in Australia under the TGA provisional approval, and we'll also hopefully have some approval from the TGA and other agencies for the use of PPS for treating viral arthritis as a result of the alpha virus infection. Now, pentazan polysulfate, as I mentioned, just to note here, the oral form of the drug Elmiron, which is marketed by Janssen Pharmaceuticals for the treatment of the bladder condition interstitial cystitis. The patent for the use of PPS or Elmiron for treatment of interstitial cystitis expired in 2010. And since that time, there has been no generic alternative for the oral version of the drug approved in the United States. And I think after our meeting with the United States FDA, it now becomes very clear why that's the case. In fact, it's almost impossible for another company to produce the identical product to Bene Pharma and therefore have the sorts of requirements that the agency requires to ensure safety and efficacy of the product. So we're very proud that we have, for a number of years now, been promoting the fact that we have an exclusive supply with Bene Pharma. So we buy the raw material from Bene Pharma, and then Paradigm prepares and packs the final product, which is the PPS in solution, ready for injection. And as a result of that, we pay a 2% royalty on our net sales back to Bene Pharma, and in return get exclusive supply. So it means for those indications such as osteoarthritis or pain or viral arthritis, where Paradigm has filed patents, Bene has agreed to only and exclusively supply Paradigm with their FDA-approved PPS product. So it puts us in a very unique position, and it's almost the regulatory exclusivity and the commercial exclusivity with Bene Pharma, as powerful as any patent protection, if not even more powerful than patent protection. So I hope that people understand that Paradigm's in a very strong position here. And I also made mention in the last ASX announcement that we made, just bear in mind that all of the Paradigm patents always include the use of the drug by all routes of administration. So that includes the injectable route, also topical, but also oral. So if you see any suggestion that the oral product will replace the injectable product, that's not going to happen, because an oral product used in the indications where Paradigm has patents, of course, would be somebody else infringing our intellectual property rights. So we do have strong patents and IP position, and this is sitting over and above the protection that we have under the exclusive agreement with Bene Pharma, and also the regulatory exclusivity that we have under the fact that this is a complex molecule with multiple moieties that make up the overall compound, and the agency really requiring that the products be in exactly the same format. And that's why I don't think we've seen any generic alternative for the oral product in the United States since 2010. So we do have a minimum life on our recent patents going out to 2035. Our most recent patent, which was the patent around the role of PPS and its ability to downregulate the nerve growth factor, and therefore the reduction in chronic pain. So a chronic pain patent goes out to 2040. So as I mentioned, our business at the moment is about generating clinical data. So we're running the EAP program in the United States. We're running the Special Access Program in Australia, generating real-world evidence. At the same time, we also are working on a lot of submissions to the various agencies. So we know that there's the TGA provisional approval. We've had our first meeting with the TGA, which occurred 11th of November last year. And that is a knockout meeting where the TGA agreed with our submission that there was an unmet medical need for the treatment of chronic pain, particularly in osteoarthritis, and that the current medications didn't offer the sort of relief that we've been able to show in our phase 2 data. So we continue to proceed with our provisional approval process. We have stage 2 coming up, which we expect to occur in Q4 2020. The expanded access program in the United States, I think people now know that we have commenced treatment of all 10 subjects in the United States, and we expect results to be reported in Q3 2020. So again, just bear in mind that that is going to be reporting on the WOMAC pain scale. And the FDA investigational new drug, the IND, we expect to make a submission in Q4 2020. And I'm starting to run out of time, so I'm just going to fly through some of these slides very quickly. I've mentioned the special access scheme. We will have a number of patients who've been treated with the phase 3 product, which is the product that we currently have in our warehouse, that will be supplied to doctors to treat their patients. They'll be gathering the data using the WOMAC pain scoring system. It's a self-administered questionnaire consisting of 24 items. So again, this is something that people can read if they're interested in the way the WOMAC pain score system works. This slide was put up to show that the first 4 questions under KOOS are questions that are quite specific to the knee outcome scoring system developed by Dr. KOOS. And as you'll see, the last 4 or 5 questions are basically the WOMAC pain questionnaire. So when we score the pain through KOOS, we're picking up both the KOOS questions as well as the WOMAC questions. So we have been able to go back through our data in a post hoc manner and look at the responses and determine that the WOMAC questions really expanded our understanding in terms of how our drug works, and we saw a very significant drug effect size in these 5 questions, which is one of the reasons why we're moving to WOMAC, as well as WOMAC being recognised by a lot of the US pharma companies for our phase 3 clinical trial design. We have published our mechanism of action, which was very important, and the agency was very impressed with this work. We have also published on the right-hand side of this slide our data, which showed that there were significant cartilage preservation effects going on with those people treated with the drug, so showing that in the blue histogram, the patients treated with PPS, their comp levels were going down nearly 12%, while their placebo colleagues were going up by 2.1%, and the Adams TS5 going down 5% by the PPS group and up 10% in the placebo group, indicating that there was less active cartilage breakdown going on in the people who got the PPS. We also showed that there was a significant reduction in the bone marrow edema volume, size, and grade. And this is a grade 3 with the red boundary, grade 3 bone marrow lesion. And after PPS, that blue boundary is the same lesion, but now reduced in its grade, going from a grade 3, which is the highest grade of a bone marrow lesion, going down to a grade 2. And I think most orthopedic surgeons, most sports physicians, or even primary care physicians would say it's very unlikely to see a lesion reducing in size once the lesion is in place. We know that through work with one of our major consultants, Professor David Felsen, who's published a lot in this area, says that large lesions generally get larger in size over time. They generally don't get smaller, but he also says the lesions are associated with increased pain, increased cartilage loss, high risk of joint destruction, and a high risk of total knee replacement. A lot of that work has been done by Flavia Secatini in Australia. So therefore, reduced lesions lead to reduced pain, reduced cartilage loss, reduced risk of joint destruction, and reduced risk of total knee replacement, which is entirely consistent with the biomarker data that I showed you before. And it's also entirely consistent with the symptomatic improvements that we saw with the patients in the drug. So we have shown this previously, the red line being the placebo, the blue line being the PPS treatment group, showing that the patients on the treated group, the PPS group, showing a clinically meaningful result out to day 165. So we have shown symptomatic correlation with the bone marrow lesion data and the biomarker data. We also saw significant improvement in the activities of daily living. Clinically meaningful results shown in the bottom left-hand side, and this is the collective of all of the patients in this cohort showed minus 38% reduction in the total volume of the knee joint, reduction in the lesion, whereas placebo going up nearly 30%, and the medial compartment going minus 40%, and the placebo going up 25%. So very nice data for us to be able to analyse, go back and look at all the signals and prepare for our phase 3 data. And we showed all these data to the US FDA, and they were, I think, quite impressed with the durability of the drug and really had a question in relation to how long does this effect go for.
Paul, I might just jump in there, if you don't mind, just to try and answer a couple of these questions, just because we're running out of time.
Yeah, sure. I'll just flick through these and see if there's anything else that's very important to mention. Just on this particular slide, looking at our cash inflow being driven by bank interest and also the R&D tax offset, outflows being very conservative, I think, for a biotech company, indicating that our cash preservation model is already in place. And then there's a few slides there in the appendix.